All right, man, we're on page 36 of this same chapter, which is chapter 5. Okay, and again, 423 of 03, Feast of Unleavened Bread. The clock will start ticking off the last 3.5 years, called the end number 4. Remember, the fulfilled prophecies give no room for doubt. Remember, Pastor told us, and he's told us from the beginning, that fulfilled prophecy proves all things. And this is why Pastor spends the time proving to us and showing to us throughout history where prophecies have been fulfilled. So if you want to keep in mind, all of Yahweh's prophecies will be fulfilled. We'll be touching on that today. And we're going to continue up with what occurs when sin is unrestrained. And we've seen that continuously throughout this sermon. Again, those scriptures that we're reinforcing, Daniel 7:25 through 27, Daniel 9:27, and Deuteronomy 28:22 through 24. Okay? Vocabulary words, things to be on the lookout this evening. We concluded with this word Philadelphia last week, but we'll hit it again. We'll rehearse it just briefly again. Today, Philadelphia in Revelation 3:7 actually shows that this is where the true love of Yahweh is taught. And the true love of Yahweh, of course, we know is Yahweh's 613 laws. And we're also going to be seeing what Satan has been doing, which is roaming to and fro on the earth. And you can see that in Job chapter 1, verse 7. And what the point is being shown there is that Satan is hunting, and just as the world is hunting today, they're hunting for the things that have been offered to us here. This is what the world is hunting. They're hunting Yahweh's rest. They're hunting the rest of Yahweh. But they can't find it because they reject the path. They reject the way, the only way to that rest. Okay, so if we pick up over here on page 36, on the second to last paragraph where it says Revelation 3:7, says, to the Moloch of the congregation of the House of Philadelphia, the House of Yahweh in Philadelphia, this means this is where the true love of Yahweh is taught. And we should have highlighted that from last week. Okay, so if you didn't highlight that, please do so. You'll see it again. People say, I love him, and they do not even know what love is to begin with. They don't know that they could probably go around the corner and find another man or another woman that they love. Love is the keeping of the laws of Yahweh. 1 Yochanan 5:3. Okay, 1 Yochanan 5:3. 1 Yochanan 5:3 shows shows what the love of Yahweh is. And Pastor made the point, it's not shacking up, it's not committing fornication or adultery. And if you take a look at the overhead there, these are those prohibited practices that we covered last week. People confuse love and lust. They get those things confused. Those prohibited practices we see are prohibitive law number 353. Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, where it says, you shall not commit adultery. And all the practices listed there in Leviticus 18, which are prohibited relationships and practices. And this is what the world is taught. This is what they practice. This is what they push. And this is what brings the disease. This is what brings the confusion. And ultimately, men, this is what's bringing the wars on the earth. And Pastor shows here at the bottom page there, bottom of the page, that last paragraph, I've got it labeled as verse 100 because that should match up with what's in the Yisrayl Says program. But it says, the first thing a person should do if they are interested in anybody at all is to find out if that person is interested in the law. Okay? To find out if that person is interested in the law. If they are not, brethren, you need to shun them. You need to get away from them and stay away from them. If I were you, I would get to the house of Yahweh and stay there on bended knees and fasting until you get over this stupidity. And that's exactly, men, what it equates to. There is no way that you're going to go out into the world and recruit somebody to be a wife, to be your wife, that is going to hold fast to the laws of Yahweh. They're not called. They're not here. They might come for a little while. They might stay for a little while. They might endure for a little while. But they're here for the wrong reasons. They'd be here for the wrong reason. And you are asking for problems. No, you're begging for problems if you do that. Okay? You do not want to get tangled up with that at all. You don't want to do it. Are there exceptions to that? There could be an exception here and there, but it is by far not the rule. Okay? Remember, we are to come here. We are here. What should we be concentrating on when we get here? We should be concentrating on perfecting ourselves, on getting the sin out of our lives. Seek first, Yahweh says, the kingdom of Yahweh, and all of these other things will be added to you. Not in our time, but in Yahweh's time. Yahweh will provide these things for us when the time is right. We can't rush Yahweh. We shouldn't want to rush Yahweh. Everything will be done in that time, in His time. Now, love is not an emotion. Love is not an emotion. Emotions come and go. That should kick in. The word emotion should bring something to mind. It should bring to mind what the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program teaches us about emotions and how to get these things under control. In the junior high self-control unit on page 30, it tells us what emotions are. It says emotions, I've kind of paraphrased some of this, either positive or negative, are strong physical and mental responses triggered by what we experience. A trigger is something that starts the process. Emotions are triggered by what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and what we think. Now think about the influences and stuff that are in the world, the influences that come from television, from the radio, from the billboards that we see, from the way that people conduct themselves. Those are all things that come in and can affect the way that we think, and they can affect our emotions. Okay? And it says triggers can affect what we feel almost instantaneously. And our brain processes 1 million pieces of information per second. Emotions can occur without conscious thought and within a split second of the event that triggered them. This is why, man, that we don't base our decisions on emotions. Okay? We need to, as the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program shows us in that same unit, it tells us to use that STOP acronym to stop and think and consider our options and proceed with the right choice. Okay? But love is not an emotion here. It says emotions come and go. If he kicked you out of the house, you would find out you didn't love him. Or if she turned and showed her anger, you'd find out about it too. You'd find out that it wasn't love after all. It was some kind of stupid emotion, more like lust than love. Okay, more like lust than love. So what's lust? What's lust? Lust here shows lust is, and I think I got this from, where did I get this from? I think I got this from either dictionary.com or I got it from merriam-websteronline.com. But lust, it shows it's an intense sexual desire or appetite. Uncontrolled or illicit sexual desire or appetite. Lecherousness. And this is what is promoted by the world. This is what's promoted out in the world. It's a passionate or overmastering desire or craving, usually followed by for a lust for power. Now, in that lecherous, it means given to or characterized by lecherousy, lustful, erotically suggestive, enticing to lust. And I want you to kind of think back. I want you to think back to when we were studying the deceptions concerning Yahweh's calendar of events, unveiling Satan, and devil worship, the shocking facts. What are the worldly holidays based around? Right. Aren't they based around this lust? Aren't they based around these sexual appetites, these sexual desires? Isn't that what drives the whole thing? What is it that the religions of the world rely on? Do they rely on truth? No. What do they rely on? Praise Yahweh. They rely on emotions. They push that emotion. And that's what drives them. There's no truth behind them. They play on these emotions, and that's what the ancient pagan religion, that's what the ancient religions did. And it's the very same things that the religions do today. It's no different. Remember, we covered last week what the truth was. Anybody remember?
Psalm 119, 142.
And? Praise Yahweh. I heard that over here too. Psalm 119, 142, and 151. Praise Yahweh. So, and that is what we should base our faith on, is the laws of Yahweh. And this is where the true love, this Philadelphia group, this is what they teach. It says the Philadelphia group means one love based on the 613 laws of Yahweh. It does not change. It gets stronger. The more we practice it, men, the stronger it gets. The emotions get stronger and more binding all the time. You know, this love for the law. Pastor has shown that to us. He's shown that to us over and over. Now, highlight this next part here. It's only when those laws are broken that you start seeing a crack in your marriage. Okay, highlight that. It's only when those laws are broken that you start seeing a crack in the marriage. You know why? Because there's nothing holding it together. Lust will not hold a marriage together. It will not do it. It's the laws of Yahweh, men, that are the cement that bind everything together. That is the cement that holds the relationship together. Okay, and it's only when those laws are broken that you start seeing a crack in your marriage, and that showed the true love wasn't there that you thought it was, and then the hatred starts building. You see how much hatred there is and how much lust and control in the things that they're seeking, and other than the welfare of the family. Then you see your families broken up, devoured, and sent on your ways that you would never have let your family fall into otherwise. It was all a matter of not loving according to the laws of Yahweh. See, it's simply because the laws of Yahweh were not followed. Remember that term. Remember how that's used back in the law when it talks about the curses that come or the consequences that come from breaking the law. It was because you simply did not follow the laws of Yahweh. It says, here is the Philadelphia group, and they teach the 613 laws. And I think this is in Revelation, we're like in Revelation 3:7 here. And it says, the Moloch of the congregation of the House of Yahweh. And Pastor says, that's me. I'm the seventh or the last Moloch of the House of Yahweh. And I fly, by the way, he says. And I fly. You know, he flies, the House of Yahweh. He says, I fly, by the way. These things says he who is holy, and that's Yahweh, he who is true. And if you want to put a cross-reference there, men, you can cross-reference Revelation 14, verse 6. Revelation 14, verse 6, which talks about the messenger of the Moloch flying. And he says, that's Yahweh who has the key of David. He says, that's Yahweh who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. I know your works. I know your works. In fact, I prophesied of them. I gave you every detail of these works that you're doing right now. They were prophesied in advance. I know your works, and I have set before you this open door that no man can shut it. For you have, he shows here, for you have a little strength. You have a little strength. If you want to cross-reference Isaiah 45:1. If you want to cross-reference Isaiah 45:1 to that. And Pastor shows, he says, oh, how little it is. You know, we're praying for this next prophecy to be fulfilled where they take the silver and gold and they lay it at the steps of the house of Yahweh. And that can be found in Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 5, verses 5 through 6 and verse 9. And it talks about where they will bring the gold and the incense, and they'll lay these things at these things at your feet. Okay, and then when Pastor says when they do this, and this is the prophecy, and he's been talking about this for a long time. You know, as we can see from the date here, But he says, he says, we're waiting for this prophecy where they take their silver and they take their gold and they lay it at the steps of the house of Yahweh. He says, and then we can call our people in. We can call our people in. Call all of those who have been training to be teachers and put them to work doing what they've been trained to do, teaching what they've been taught. He says, then we can call our people in and put a 24-hour school where we can have it interesting for our young people. It will be 24 hours of interest, and they will not want to go into the stupid world and partake of death and the death sentence. And that's really, man, that's all that's offered out there. Life is not offered outside these gates. Here he says, he has set before us this open door, and no man can shut it. No man can shut this door that Yahweh's opened. There is no way whatever Satan tries to do, whatever she thinks she can do, or the people that she is inspiring to do, there's no way they can shut this work down. This work is going to continue on, and it's going to usher in the kingdom of Yahweh. Yahweh prophesies of that. He says, you have a little strength and have kept my word, even in the face of destruction, violence, hatred, wrath, and the call for our deaths and all. You have kept my word and have not denied my name. You have done that. Think about the intense persecution that came about when Pastor was arrested. Think about what was going through our individual minds at the time. And the test that was going on, and what was going on in our minds. But we stood strong. We stood in our place. We're still here, and we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere, and people are going to realize that. Okay, who has Matthew 24:9? Who's got that scripture?
Then they will hand you over to be afflicted and will kill you, and you will be hated above all peoples for my name's sake.
Okay, praise Yahweh. That was Matthew 24:9. And they will hand you over to be afflicted and will kill you. And, they will call for our deaths. They will kill you. That remember the character assassination that was taking place. All of that. Well, there's a side note there, W2. And that W2 shows, and then they will hand you up to affliction as if you were the cause of all of these evils. Remember Pastor talking about that years and years ago? I say years and years ago, but remember Pastor talking about that. He's saying that Mother Mary is going to try to blame the house of Yahweh. These wars are all your fault, house of Yahweh, because you won't worship me. You won't give me the honor that's due to me. Now, all of this is coming upon you because you won't do that. And they're going to try to turn the world even more, even the hatred that exists out there for Yahweh's house, she's going to try to even do that more. But as if you were the cause of all these evils, okay? And you shall be hated, and you shall be hated of all nations, even those who tolerate all other sects and parties. But in no nation will the children of the devil tolerate the children of Yahweh. Okay? If you remember when the persecutions took place, well, I think it was with the first or second persecution, the house of Yahweh the believers kind of flew under the radar there for a little bit. And then they became known. Then they became targeted, even though when every other sect was allowed to be in existence, the house of Yahweh was targeted for extinction. Okay, and I think that was, if I remember right, that's in the book, The Lost Faith of the Apostles and Prophets, is where it talks about that. But continuing on down here, he says, behold, I will give those out of the assemblies of the accuser who preach themselves to be those who worship Yahweh, and they are not, but they attempt to deceive by falsehood. Behold, I will appoint them for the purpose of worshiping in the presence of your footstool, and they will understand that I love you. And look at that last line down there. That is a great promise from Yahweh that you can count on. That is a great promise from Yahweh you can count on. Think about that they will understand that I love you. This house, the people in this house, the people that are striving to be like Yahweh, Yahweh sets his love upon this house. not anybody else in the world. You think about that tremendous blessing, that precious blessing of what we're being offered. And that precious blessing of having our prayers heard. The world thinks that they have their prayers heard by the creator of the universe, but they fall on deaf ears. It falls on deaf ears. Because Yahweh doesn't listen to those who practice iniquity. He's listening to those whom are being called and tried and tested right now. Okay? And think about that. Think about, that blows, that is mind-boggling when you think about that, but it's true. Okay, highlight this next part here. Highlight the rest of this paragraph here. It says, you can know for sure that he loves you and will protect you in this thing if you stay strong and strengthen your feeble knees and get rid, he says, and get rid of this fear. And get rid of this fear. We've got nothing to fear. We shouldn't fear what mankind thinks that they can do to us. Remember that example that we mentioned last week with in Daniel with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I can't remember the Hebrew names. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, I think were their names. But you think about the strength that they showed in the times of adversity. You think about that, and that should be our goal, to where we get to that strength, to be that strong. This word feeble, if you look at this word feeble means lacking physical strength or lacking the strength of character. Okay, and that's according to Google.com. That's where that definition comes from. But Dictionary.com also shows it means to be physically weak, as from age or sickness, or to be frail. It means weak intellectually or morally. It can mean a feeble mind, a weakness of the mind. Lacking in volume, loudness, brightness, distinctness, a feeble voice, feeble light, lacking in force, strength, or effectiveness, feeble resistance, or feeble arguments. These weak-minded arguments. The way that we can strengthen ourselves morally and physically, morally, is through what Pastor has been teaching us to do and encouraging us to do, which is to study. To utilize our time wisely, because that strengthens our mind. That strengthens, that strengthens us intellectually. That strengthens us morally. It gives us the strength of mind to be able to withstand these foolish arguments that people use to try to pull us out of the house of Yahweh. Okay? And continue, highlight this next section too. It says, because you have kept the word of my patience, I will keep you from this hour of temptation that will come upon the whole world. So highlight that. Highlight, because you have kept the word of my patience, I will keep you from this hour of temptation which will come upon the whole world. Okay, make sure you highlight that, because we're going to see that again. And this will come as a test to test those who dwell upon the earth. And behold, I come quickly. And Pastor shows here, he says he's never said that to any other group. In Isaiah 35:4, say to those who have fearful minds, be strong and do not fear. Behold, your Father will come with his judgments. He will come with his judgments. He will bring forth his judgments, is what this means. He says, with recompense for you, not with vengeance. Not with vengeance against people who are waging these wars. He will come and save you out of this thing. You see the promise that is given there? Your Father will come with his judgments, and he will come up and he will save you out of this thing. Verse 6 here, highlight this. Then the lame man will leap like a deer. If you remember, this was one of the things in Malachi. So highlight that. Highlight that. Then the lame man will leap like a deer. If you remember, this is one of the things in Malachi. He also shows, where he also shows this, that once this takes place, you will receive your power and healthy minds and healthy body, that you will leap like calves going forth from the stall. Highlight that phrase as well. You will leap like calves going forth from the stall. Okay, and we can see that, of course, we remember that's in Malachi chapter 4 and verse 2. Okay, And Pastor writes here, he says, I see what sin has done to many of you. It's sickening, brethren. It's sickening, but brethren, you can be healed, and you will be if you stick with Yahweh's house and his work. You see that promise there? He says, I will see. He says, you will be healed if you will stick with Yahweh and his work. Isaiah 56:7. If you want to highlight that, if you want to use that as a cross reference there, and Yisrayl chapter 2, verse 32. If you want to highlight that as well. Isaiah 56:7 says, I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted upon my altar, so they'll be acceptable. And my house will be called a house of prayer for all people, or for all nations. Yisrayl chapter 2 and verse 32. And whoever will call with the name of Yahweh will be delivered. For in Mount Zion and Jerusalem there will be deliverance, as Yahweh has said, among the remnant who has escaped from those whom Yahweh calls. So think about that. And everyone who will call with the name of Yahweh. Does that mean that if you use the name of Yahweh, you've got it made? Nope. That's not exactly what that means. This word call. When you look up this word call, this comes from Merriam-Webster.com, and this is just some of the definitions there. This is just some of those definitions. To command or to request, to come or to be present. We are called to Yahweh's house. We're commanded or requested to be present here at Yahweh's house 3 times a year so that we can learn of Yahweh's way. It means to summon to a particular activity, to keep the feast, to learn righteousness, employment or office, to invite. Remember, this coming to Yahweh's house is an invitation. We can't come here unless Yahweh calls us, unless Yahweh brings us here. To rouse from sleep. This world is asleep. Men, when we were called to Yahweh's house, we were roused from our sleep. We were aroused from our slumber. And we were called to action. We were given the order, the next definition down, we were given the order for or to bring into action. To become perfect, just as Yahweh our Father is perfect. To take on his perfect, righteous character. This is what we have been called into. Okay, back to the book here. It says, then the lame man will leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb, that is the silent, will sing. For in the wilderness waters will break out with streams in the desert. These precious promises there, the precious promises there, you really need to read often and cling to them. Think about that. Think about those precious, and I love the way Pastor put it there. Because these promises that are offered to us, they are precious. And it's things that we should esteem more highly than fine gold, than anything in this world. These precious promises, you really need to read and often cling to them, especially as you see the days growing closer and the last 3.5 years go into action. These precious promises. Look here. You can take a look at 1 Kepha chapter 3, verse 9 and 12 and 13. And it shows that not repaying evil for evil, nor reviling with reviling. Okay? In other words, no retaliation. Right? But on the contrary, blessing. Knowing that you were called to this, what were we called to do? We were called to overcome evil, so that you may inherit the blessing. For the eyes of Yahweh are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. Look at that promise. His ears are open to the prayers, but the face of Yahweh is against those who do evil. And who is he who will harm you if you become followers of what is right? What can man do to us? Man can't do anything to us. They can't take away our eternal life. They can't take away, our righteousness unless we give it up. So Pastor Jose says, turn over to Malachi chapter 4. Here are more of the details. Let me see, do I have any more there? Nope. Okay, here are more of the details that we saw there in Deuteronomy 28 of what is going to take place. He goes into details, and then the last detail he goes into is in Revelation. He says, we will not have time to cover that, but it's in Revelation 15 through 17. Then he goes back to Malachi chapter 4, verse 1, and he says, for behold, the day comes that will burn like an oven. Yes, and we're going to see it very soon. And all of the proud, and yes, that's going to take place in the last 3.5 years. And all who do wickedly will be stubble in the day that comes that will burn them up, says Yahweh of hosts. And it will leave them neither root nor branch. That will be the end of it, as we saw in Isaiah. And remember Isaiah 24, remember Isaiah 24:6. I didn't write that one down. But Isaiah 24:6, if you want to cross-reference that. Isaiah 24:6. Yes, even Satan herself will even find rest at the end of this thing. And all of the demon gods, they have no rest. They've had no rest for years. They roam to and fro in the earth. Okay? Got a vocabulary word there. They roam to and fro. They roam to and fro in the earth. And remember, that means hunting what you have. That is Yahweh's rest. But they cannot find it. The Hebrew words show there that it's actually hunting what you have and not finding it. She keeps hunting it, and the gods do too, trying to find a cure for their diseases. Okay? And we can see that, you look there, you can see there, and you can cross-reference that with Job chapter 1, verse 7 there, where it says, and Yahweh said to Satan, where do you come from? And Satan answered Yahweh and said, from going back and forth in the earth and walking up and down in it. So that's what she did, and her and the gods, that's what they did. You know, and they were trying to find a cure for their diseases. This next verse down here, it says, but for you who reverence my name, the light of righteousness will arise with healing in its wings, and you will go out leaping as calves released from the stall. You will go out like calves released from the stall. And you will tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that you will do this. Who has got Proverbs 4:22?
Proverbs 4, verse 22. For they mean life to those who find them and health to their whole body.
Praise Yahweh. So we can see here that the laws of Yahweh, they mean life. And see, this is the laws of life. They mean life to those who find them and health to the whole body. Now there's a side note there, G8. And that side note, G8, that is that they shall have health and strength along with all of the other blessings that are prophesied in the law and the prophets. And, you know, and that's that's in Deuteronomy 28. You know, it shows in that first half there of Deuteronomy 28, it shows the many blessings that will come, the blessings of health, the strength, the blessings in all that they put and all that the people put their hands to do. And you can cross-reference First Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18, with that as part of the blessings. And if you remember, that is dealing with that First Thessalonians is actually speaking of the first resurrection. Remember, blessed and holy is he who has part in that, in the first resurrection. That's written in Revelation as well. Okay. But we see here that this is the finishing. That is in the finishing judgment to bring forth the completion of these judgments. And then Pastor shows her, he says, remember the laws of Moshe, he says. It's going to come. You know, remember the laws. It doesn't mean just think about them, oh yeah, I remember that. But remember, rehearse them, put them to use, practice them, make them part of our lives. You know, remember the law of Moshe. He says it's going to come. It's here now. We are preaching it at this time. So far in history, the prophecies have all been correct. Sickness, incurable diseases, nuclear bombs. Have all of these things come to pass? Have they all come to pass? How did they know that there was going to be nuclear bombs? When Matthew 24 was written, brethren, there was not even such thing as a firecracker at that time. Now there are nuclear bombs that can actually darken the sun and roll the heavens together as a scroll. I want to read you one thing in defense of Yahweh. The words retribution. Now think about this. The words retribution, punishment, or vengeance. Think about what these are. These are false accusations against Yahweh. Okay? These are false accusations that are coming forth from the adversary. Remember the character assassination. This is what's taking place here. The retribution, punishment, vengeance. They're false accusations against Yahweh. Yahweh has a perfect plan here. He is allowing it to be carried out. He is allowing this perfect plan to be carried out. Okay? Who has got Isaiah 55:11? Who's got that one?
Isaiah 55:11. So is my word, the law and the prophets that goes forth from my mouth. My word will not return to me void without producing effect, but it will accomplish that which I please, and it will succeed in the thing for which I sent it.
Praise Yahweh. So Isaiah 55:11 is showing that every word that goes forth from Yahweh, every single law, every single prophecy is not going to return to him void. Everything that he says that is going to come to pass is going to come to pass. Every prophecy that has been prophesied to come to pass up until this time has come to pass. Pastor has taken, hours and hours and hours and years of study, and has shown us over and over and over how these things have come to pass, so that we can have our faith built, and so that we can learn, yes, those came to pass in a tremendous amount of detail. What makes us think that the remainder are not going to come to pass? They are going to come to pass. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. Okay? So you can cross-reference that one, Isaiah 55:11 with that one. If you want to cross-reference these other two scriptures as well, you can. We can cross-reference these as well. Isaiah 14:24. Isaiah 14:24, which reads, Yahweh of hosts has vowed, saying, as surely as I have planned, so will it come to pass. So as he has planned it, as he has set it forth in his plan, it will come to pass. Just as surely as I have purposed, so it will stand. Okay? Yahweh says, I am Yahweh, I change not. These things are going to come to pass. Proverbs 19:21 shows many plans are in the mind of a man. Nonetheless, it is Yahweh's purposes which will prevail. Man, we can plan our own way, but Yahweh's going to direct our paths. These things are going to come about in the way and the manner that Yahweh directs and he dictates. Okay? He is allowing these things to be carried out. Back to the book here, it says, he has never been angry with mankind. Yahweh has never been angry with mankind. Amalek was given power over Israel, who would not at one time forgive sins. That was the one Moshe saw in the burning bush. Those Malachim have those powers. Okay, highlight this next part. It was not Yahweh who ever released anger or vengeance on anyone. Okay, highlight that. It was not Yahweh who ever released anger or vengeance on anyone. Yahweh has never done that. Let me read this to you, he says. You will find it twice. It is used in statements that vengeance belongs to Yahweh, but it is not vengeance. The word does not mean vengeance. In the divine exercise of judgment, there is no element of vindictiveness, nothing by the way of taking revenge. There is nothing, Yahweh doesn't take revenge. But remember, it was the lying pen of the scribes that falsified the scriptures and wrote them wrong. It was a way of a character assassination of Yahweh to change his character from what he is, from the character that Yahweh exhibits, which is a loving heavenly Father, and turn it into a mean, vindictive God. It was all part of that plan. It was all part of that character assassination. It says, why did they put it that way? Highlight this next part. Highlight this next two sentences here. Why did they put it that way? They want you to believe that Yahweh is what the Catholic Church teaches him to be. Okay? They want you to believe that Yahweh is what the Catholic Church teaches him to be, that he is angry, vengeful. He is an angry, vengeful being who wants to take revenge upon the earth at this time. Okay? That's what they want. They want to promote Mary. This is what the Catholic Church wants to promote. They want to promote Mary, who is a lustful adulteress. Now, this is what the scriptures say. I'm not making any accusations against her. Pastor makes that clear that he's not making any reviling accusations against anyone. He's simply pointing out what the scriptures are showing. I am just telling you what the scriptures say. She even pays her lovers because I guess her beauty is depleting now. So she is paying her lovers to come to her. She gives them money. Yahweh says she is worse than the whores who go out committing fornication and adultery. She is worse than they are because she actually pays them to come to her instead of having the male prostitute pay. Okay? If you want to cross-reference there, Yeketskiah 16:32. If you want to cross-reference Yeketskiah 16:32, where Yahweh shows, and he says, you adulterous wife, you prefer strangers rather than your own husband. And there's a side note there, a side note A, and it says, and Pastor shows where it says, a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament by Julius First translates this to as you rebellious. So he's talking, when he mentions this adulterous wife, he's showing she rebelled. She is a rebellious wife. She was rebellious. She rebelled against Yahweh. She rebelled against the authority that was placed over her. Okay, this next verse down, it says, it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing what she is and what she has become. She is ever hunting a way to get rid of the sickness that is in her and the many diseases that she is carrying. You think about that. Remember what we see on earth. We see the same thing going on. The same thing is going on in the heavens as we see going on in the earth. Okay? When you think of this wars, the sickness and the disease, when you think about that, you think about these heavenly beings who have followed her in this rebellion and who are practicing these same sins. It says she is ever hunting a way to get rid of the sickness that is in her and the many diseases that she is carrying. She was made stronger than you were. The angels and the gods were too. But they're coming to an end. Now you think about that. They were made stronger, they were made much stronger and more powerful than mankind. Psalm 8 shows that you have made mankind a little lower than the Malachim, but you will crown him with glory and honor. We were made lower. In Isaiah chapter 14, verses 15 through 16, we see the end. We see Satan's end. If you want to cross-reference those two scriptures, Psalm 8:5, and if you want to cross-reference Isaiah 14, verses 15 through 16 there. In Isaiah 14, verse 15 through 16, it says, yet you will be brought down to Sheol, the grave, to the sides of the pit. Her end, her end is she is dying, she is going to die. And those who see you will stare at you, and they will talk about you, saying, is this the one? Is this the adversary who shook the earth and who made the kingdoms tremble? She is dying, and she has but a little time. These diseases are killing her. They're bringing her strength down. And she knows it. The diseases are killing them, and they can't find cures for their diseases anymore. If they did, if they could find these cures, if they could find the cures of these diseases, Pastor shows, he says, they would be revealing them to mankind who follows them. But they can't find them. They can't find the cures for these diseases. Yahweh says they won't find them because there is no cure. The diseases that mankind is bringing upon themselves, they're incurable. The only thing Pastor shows here is prevention. The only thing's prevention. These are the things we must seek for from Yahweh and must follow in order to prevent these things from coming upon us. Now you think about that. You think about this prevention. These are the things we must seek for from Yahweh. Remember, Yahshua said, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you. In seeking the kingdom of Yahweh, we're seeking forth the laws that govern this kingdom. We're seeking the laws that govern perfect health. We're seeking the laws that govern living in perfect peace with our neighbors. These are the things that we are seeking. And if we seek these things from Yahweh, and these things we must follow in order to prevent these things from coming upon us. Because if we practice these things, then the curses or the consequences that come from breaking these laws or violating these laws are going to come upon us. It's a cause and effect type of thing. It's a cause and effect type of thing. So what is next in this prophecy? What's next? First off, we're going to see the signing of this peace treaty. He says the last 3.5 years is going to go into effect. So we've actually seen everything that we've seen right now, that this last 3.5 years is in effect. That is the reason this government was changed, and certain people in politics were taken out and replaced with those who agree with this peace treaty. Remember, we read earlier, and Pastor showed us earlier, that those who oppose these plans, they're simply taken out of office. They're removed, and they're replaced with people who will follow that party line, so to speak. We're going to see that go into effect. Will you believe then? We've seen it go into effect. Did we believe it when it did? Do you believe now? Pastor's asking these questions. Now we're going to see that go into effect, if you notice. President Bush is already saying, once we get this done, we're going to have true peace. Remember, we're looking for that true peace. The Pope is saying, once this gets done, we're going to have true peace. They're all claiming this true peace. So when they get it done, they are going to proclaim, now at last we have true peace. Is that going to result in true peace? What takes place? Praise Yahweh. So when they declare, peace, true peace, now we have this. At last we now have this true peace. Then what? Then we see the sudden destruction will come upon them. In 1 Thessalonians 5:3, Pastor shows here, he says, when they say this, then you can look for this sudden destruction. Now, sudden destruction here is talking about nuclear activity. Okay, you think about what we've learned here recently about the 1 hour. I say recently, it's been over several years, but it seems like it's been recent. But it's rehearsed. It's rehearsed constantly. You think about this. It's this sudden destruction is talking about this nuclear activity. In 1 hour, this 1 hour nuclear burning, depending on where the missiles are launched from, in less time than that, but anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, as that Dr. Theodore Postel that we've read that many times, Armageddon coming in 1 hour. And he said it was at that time, anywhere from the time that the missile is launched until it goes through its coast phase and it reaches its target on the other side, anywhere from a half an hour to an hour. That's all it takes. Think about how quickly. Think about this. You want to put that into perspective? If that would have been done at the start of this class, there would be roughly 10 minutes left before that sudden destruction, before that great nuclear burning takes place. That's a scary thought. But this is the ultimate result of what sin brings. I do not get this. I do not see this big part of nuclear activity in the first part of the 42 moons. I see wars, and yes, they will grow progressively worse. They're going to grow. Pastor shows here is progressively worse. If you want to take a look here in Revelation chapter 6, verses 8 and verse 12. And I said, I look and I behold a pale horse, and the name upon him who sat upon it was Death, and Sheol, the grave, followed with him. and power was given to them over a fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword. Remember some of these vocabulary words that we had. The sword, which is with war, hunger, and with pestilence, which is these incurable diseases. The same under the authority of the beast of the earth. Notice under whose authority that is. In verse 12 it says, "And I looked, and when he had opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake." And we've heard about when these nuclear weapons are detonated, just the violent shaking that takes place. "And behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood," with all of this dust and powder and dust and soot and everything that gets thrown up into the air. It's going to block out the sun. It's going to block out the moon. These things we're going to see. We're going to witness these things, and we are going to testify to these things to those who are resurrected. What I see in prophecy, back to the book here, what I see in prophecy is probably something like what took place in Afghanistan or Iraq, and was going to take place in a number of those countries. That Malachi Martin named in his book, The Keys of This Blood, and also named them in his interviews before they killed him, or before he died anyway. It just seems like somebody must have killed him because he was healthy one day and dead the next. And if you want to, General Wesley Clark gave an interview, and the name of that interview was 7 Countries in 5 Years, and it went and actually outlined those. It actually outlined these countries here, these 7 countries in 5 years. Verse 123 here, it says, "But you're going to see this take place. You're going to see this signing of that and it put back into action. Remember, this is a 7-year plan of action." Remember, we've been going over this. This is a 7-year plan of action. It says the last part is to give the old city to the Pope. Okay, is to give the old city to the Pope, and that's in Daniel 11:39. It talks about that in Revelation 11:12. You can cross-reference those two things there. Daniel 11:39 and Revelation 11:12. Now, before that takes place, there's going to be a wall that's going to go through there. The temple is going to be rebuilt. We're going to have those articles out here somewhere where you can get them and you can read them and you can listen to the tapes. All of that is going to be done according to prophecy. Everything is going to be done according to prophecy, according to the plan of Yahweh. Look at these last two paragraphs here. These last 2 paragraphs is really a sobering message, a sobering reminder of how serious these times are that we're looking at right now. Pastor shows here, he says, "You have no excuse, brethren. Not even a child has an excuse for not believing what the house of Yahweh is bringing at this time. I love you dearly, and I love all of you. The peace of Yahweh be with you." You think about that, you have no excuse, and not even a child. This last paragraph, I've got this thing red-lined, because of what is shown there. "As much as I would like to see your love for Yahweh and his servants, I want to tell you that you're going to have to be very strong in the future." And if you remember, not long ago, men, if you remember, I can't remember how long ago that sermon was, but Pastor gave a warning because of the deception that is going to be coming forth. And you can see the deep care and the deep concern that he has for each and every one of us here in this house, because of the depth of that deception that's coming. You can see the worry. You could really see it, because he knows very well this time period, and he knows way better, in far more detail, men, than we do, just how severe and how bad this deception is going to be. But we're warned that it's going to be a horrible, horrible deception. It's going to be it's going to be bad. I want to tell you, you're going to have to be very strong in the future. And the only way we can is by following our pastor's instructions, redeeming the time, studying these books, getting this knowledge into us. so that we can recognize the falsehood when it comes to us. Because if we don't have these things in our mind, men, if we don't have these things in the forefront of our minds, and if we don't rehearse them, then we run that risk of falling into this deception. He says, I want to tell you, you're going to have to be very strong in the future. The part I did not get to is the deception that is going to be brought forth here in the next few months, coming forth from this beastly system. If you are not sound in this doctrine, brethren, Yahweh says you will turn. Look at this warning here that's given to us here in Matthew 24, 23 through 24. Then if any man says to you, behold, here is the Messiah, or he is there, do not believe it. For there will arise false messiahs and false prophets who will show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect. And you think about that level of deception. There's a side note there, W4, it says, they would deceive, if possible, the very elect. But it is not possible that Yahweh should allow the body of believers to be deceived. And it's going to be the body of believers who truly call upon the name of Yahweh, who truly are striving to put these laws in their inward parts, to truly take on Yahweh's righteous character. It's putting forth that effort and striving to do this. That's what's going to keep us from falling into this deception. The obedience to what comes forth from our pastor and overseer. That's what's going to keep us from this deception. If you remember, Eve was deceived, Pastor wrote in one of his books, Eve was deceived because of her rebellious attitude. Remember, Pastor the scriptures referred to Satan as an adulterous wife, and the side note showed that meant rebellious. We have to be, we cannot be rebellious and expect to live. We won't. If we're rebellious men, we will be deceived. But if you are not sound in this doctrine, brethren, Yahweh says you will turn. Yahweh says that is it. So be strong and keep your mind on this sermon. Keep playing these sermons to yourselves. I love you. Yahweh bless you. Shalom. So, the thing is, as long as we're obedient, we remain in our place. We fill our minds with what comes forth, with this golden oil that comes forth. And we're obedient men. We don't have to worry about falling into this deception. Well, men, you know what time it is? It's test time. It is time for a test. Okay, just a few reminders here. Remember, this is an open book. But try to challenge yourself by not using the book if possible. Okay? Do our best. Try to remember. Rehearse what we've gone through. Use the test. The test is an instrument to measure how well we retain knowledge. Okay? And it's just like in confessions, man, we got to be honest with ourselves. We have to testify against ourselves. So honestly, look at this and go through this and see what it is that we know. And what we know, praise Yahweh. What we don't know, you know what? That shows us, okay, I need to brush up on this. Okay? You can take the test home. Of course, we're going to take the test home and bring it back. Just bring it back with the next class. Okay? For those who are outside of the Abelin area, and if you want to take the test, this is for all of those who are joining us through live stream, through Facebook, through the internet, or through archived classes. First step is you want to make sure you've viewed or listened to all parts of the class covering the entire chapter so you know what's been covered. You can look at them at Yahweh.com or on Facebook. We can look at them there. And then you can request a test online. And it will be emailed to you. Okay? And answer the test and email it back. And you want to look at in the subject line of your email, use the MBYCC as the subject of your email. That way they can filter it, they can look at it, they can see what it is. Okay? And the email address is right there on the screen. The House of Yahweh Abelin at gmail.com. And notice it's Abelin, A-B-E-L-I-N, not Abelin. Okay? So you want to send your request, ask for your test there to that email address with that subject line, and they will get it to you, men. and they will get it to you. Take it, submit it, get it back, and we'll get it graded, and we'll see how we do. Okay? Well, praise Yahweh, man.